October 18th, 1943, 09:14 hours, south of Termoli, Italy. The sky is a pale, bruised grey, somewhere between morning and smoke. Mortar rounds hiss over the ridge and break with a rip of white dust, the sound bouncing against the collapsing stone farms that once held olive harvests instead of infantry. You can taste chalk in the air, and fear, mostly fear. 17-year-old signalman Alan Fairbanks crouches behind a tangle of broken grapevines, headphones clamped tight enough to hurt. He's small for the uniform, thin wrists poking from frayed wool, but his voice is steady as he whispers into the handset clipped to his battle dress pocket. Charlie Actual, bearing 3 degrees west, correction 5 fire. His operator English is clipped, businesslike. Anyone hearing him might think he'd been born with a wireless set welded to his ear. On the ridge behind him, 4th Indian Division gunners crank the elevation on a 25-pounder and send another round into the German approach lanes. The ground jumps, birds scatter, the wind smells like cordate. Alan doesn't flinch. He's listening for something else, something faint, something impossible. He sweeps the dial with a tiny adjustment of thumb and index finger, the motion so practiced it's almost a nervous tick. Each scratch of static feels like a secret trying to breathe through interference. Feuerstellung, zwei korrigieren. German clear as a railway announcement, and close. His pupils sharpen, there you are. It's not just any chatter. It's artillery corrections, live, furious, and unencrypted. Wehrmacht mortar batteries adjusting fire for the counterattack that's already pushing the British line backward yard by yard. Alan shouldn't be hearing this. Frequencies like that are supposed to belong to gods, invisible, unreachable, dangerous. But Italy is a messy war. Improvised fronts, stretched communications, mismatched frequencies. A schoolboy with a knack for radios can accidentally collide with fate. A fresh whine builds overhead, the kind that turns grown men into statues. Then the blast, closer this time. Earth showers the trench. Someone swears about the Jerrys walking their fire too cleanly. Alan licks dry lips. He adjusts the gain again, isolating a second voice, agitated, faster, asking for Strufewer, sweeping fire across the valley. They're onto something, and the Allied line won't hold if they keep correcting that fast. He should report the intercept. That's the rule. But good rules don't win bad wars. Instead, he pushes off the mud and slides toward the company command dugout, nearly losing his headset cable in the process. The dugout reeks of sweat, diesel, and wet paper maps. Officers hunch over range overlays, arguing about where the counterattack going to break through. Lieutenant Peter Lysander, barely older than Alan, looks up with eyes that haven't slept since the crossing at Biferno. What have you got? Alan yanks off his headset just enough to speak. German mortars, they're adjusting for a flank sweep. They're closer than we thought. Frequencies unsecured. Lysander swears softly. He doesn't ask how Alan found the band. Everyone here knows the boy has a talent for stumbling into frequencies the manuals don't mention. How close? Alan doesn't answer with words. He plugs the headset into the dugout speaker tap and dials the gain. The room freezes as German syllables fill the bunker like ghosts. Even officers who don't speak a word understand the tone, coordination under pressure, fire correction, urgency. Corporal Grave spits, bloody hell, they're shooting over their own lads' heads. Lysander makes his decision in one breath. Can you jam it? Alan doesn't nod. Nodding implies certainty. What he does is stranger. He turns the dial half a centimeter, listening to the harmonics like a musician tuning a violin. The kid's fingers move as if the radio's alive and he's just coaxing it into confession. Better, he says quietly, I can talk to them. For a heartbeat, no one breathes. Lysander's face creases. Talk to them. I can transmit on the band. You're joking. Alan meets his eyes. I'm not. It's insanity. It's brilliance. It's also treason if anyone higher up decides to interpret regulations creatively. Outside, another round hits, too close. The map table shivers and the lamp flickers. Lysander looks at the maps, then at the boy, then at the sky, as if asking whatever god is assigned to Italy whether this is how mortals are supposed to fight wars. 10 minutes, he finally says. You get 10 minutes to make it hurt. Alan doesn't smile. He just plugs the headset back in and tunes the frequency until the German mortar crew's world becomes his. A new voice crackles in, asking for confirmation on coordinates near the olive terraces. Alan's voice slides into the transmission like a ghost wearing a foreign uniform. Coordinate bestätigt, für nach Süden, 2 Strich weiter. Coordinates confirmed, fire south, 2 marks further. A subtle change, barely a betrayal, but enough to bend steel in the wrong direction. He waits. 5 seconds. 10. Then the German battery fires, and somewhere beyond the ridge, men start screaming in German. Alan's hands don't shake. The war has just become a radio duel, and the schoolboy seems strangely at home inside it. But what happens when the enemy realizes someone else is steering their guns? What happens when 10 minutes becomes 11? The first hint that the deception works is not sound, but silence. A strange, puzzled pause on the German frequency, as if men are staring across no man's land wondering who they just shelled and why the screams coming back have familiar accents. Alan uses the pause like a pianist, savoring the hush before the next note. Für Ernut, korrigieren 2 Strich ostwärts, he transmits, voice steady, cadence perfect enough to pass on a foggy battlefield morning. East 2 increments. South then east, a gentle curve like dragging a pencil across a map into the wrong set of trenches. From the ridge, fresh detonations punch the horizon. The echo arrives a heartbeat later, bouncing off the ravines. The Germans have no reason to suspect anything yet. Mortar crews live by instinct, not paranoia. Correction orders come quick in combat, and mistakes are normal. A bad coordinate today is just another apology tomorrow, nothing more. But this isn't a mistake. In the dugout, Grave is leaning so far over the table his helmet brim almost touches Italy. Lysander watches the loudspeaker like it's a crystal ball. Outside, the counterattack stumbles again, hesitant now, robbed of the mortar umbrella that was supposed to keep British rifles buried in the dirt. Alan sweeps his thumb across the gain, tuning for feedback, listening for any whisper that the Germans have sniffed out the trick. Static, German, static. The war hums inside the radio like a swarm of angry insects. Then a new voice, older, cooler, joins the net, a controller by the confidence. Fürstellung 3, Meldung, Einschläge unklar, Beobachter antworten. Firing position 3, report, impacts unclear, request spotter. Alan looks up. Lysander doesn't need translation, tone alone is enough. They're getting suspicious, he mutters. Suspicious isn't the same as certain, and suspicion doesn't make rounds land straighter. Alan jumps in again, now mimicking the clipped authority of a fire control NCO. Kein Beobachter notwendig, Einschläge bestätigt, fortsetzen mit Strafschuss und Gefechtsfeldreinigung. No spotter needed, impacts confirmed, continue with strafing shot and battlefield sweeping. The phrase hangs in the dugout like cold breath. Even Grave whistles. He's better at that than the bloody Germans are. Alan isn't better, he's obsessed. His father was a lineman for the General Post Office before the Blitz, and Alan grew up sleeping under a bunk bed filled with old field sets, coil spools, and valve tubes. While most boys chased footballs, Alan chased frequencies, pirate broadcasts, weather ships, post office relays, anything humming across the airwaves. War didn't create his gift, it just gave it a battlefield. A new salvo screams overhead, smashing into the far side of the olive terraces. The German counterattack hunches under its own artillery umbrella like a boxer shielding from his own punches. Infantry surge forward, then stall, then crawl, then stop, pinned by confusion as much as by shrapnel. But 10 minutes is generosity in combat. Sometimes suspicion needs only 60 seconds to become protocol. Back on the German net, voices overlap now, arguing, contradicting, demanding confirmation. Someone insists they're firing across friendly trenches. Someone else claims the observers are reading smoke wrong. Someone swears the wind has shifted. War builds chaos faster than it kills. Then through the dense mesh of chatter comes the chilling phrase that freezes Alan's fingers. Codewort anfordern. Request the code word. He cuts transmission instantly. In the dugout, it takes Lysander a full second to process, then another to decide whether to curse or pray. The Germans are asking for the day's authentication signal, the verbal fingerprint proving the speaker is who he claims. No code word, no control, no deception. Alan's breathing turns shallow. His world has narrowed to nothing but static, language, and the distant percussion of mortars. Somewhere up the hill, a field ambulance races toward the aid station, its siren an ugly violin against the valley walls. Grav finally breaks the silence. Well, that's it then. It is, but Alan keeps thinking. He rewinds every German voice he's heard since morning, trying to remember whether anyone said anything resembling a code challenge or reply. Code words come in every shape, colors, saints, birds, railway stations. Simple words that keep good men from killing the wrong ones. He finds nothing. Lysander leans against the table, rubbing his forehead with the edge of his sleeve. We cut it, pull the set and... No, Alan snaps it too quickly, too sharp, as if opinion alone could survive incoming fire. He doesn't mean disrespect, he means urgency. They're still arguing, he says. They haven't confirmed the request. I can stall. Stalling command posts is delicate work. Even generals get short-tempered under bombardment, and mortar control NCOs are worse. They're precise men in imprecise situations. They don't tolerate delay. But war has given Alan something school never did, the ability to lie with confidence. He transmits again, voice clipped, irritated, and authoritative, exactly how he imagines a German fire controller would sound after being questioned mid-barrage. Bestätigt, Codewort folgt nach Einschlagskontrolle, Beobachter blockiert. Confirmed, codeword to follow after impact confirmation, spotter blocked. He slams the mic switch off and listens. The frequency cracks like ice. Silence, then static, then the heavy exhale of a man forced to obey procedure. Another barrage begins winding up, longer, heavier, angrier. Lysander is staring at the boy like he's seeing a weapon the army never issued, but desperately needed. The Germans still don't know whose trenches they're pulverizing. Not yet. But code words don't stall forever. And somewhere across the valley, a German observer is about to see smoke rising from the wrong side of the battlefield. The German controller's sigh is still fading through the loudspeaker when the valley gives birth to a new sound, so sharp and abrupt that even hardened infantrymen duck by instinct. A single whistle blast. Short, urgent. Then another. Observers. Alan looks toward the ridgeline, though there's nothing to see but olive trunks, shattered walls, and the low metallic shimmer of smoke drifting off impact craters. The German counterattack has bunched itself into the terraces, good cover, good angles, bad place to survive confusion. Men crouch behind stone ledges as the mortars walk closer and closer to their own boots. Observers don't care about cover, they care about line of sight. Somewhere above, binocular glass is catching sunlight. The German net erupts again, this time not with doubt, but coordination. The observer's tone is clipped and nasal, the voice of a man who knows artillery by instinct. He rattles off distances and smoke reference points. He demands sightline data. He asks for verification on trench markers. The dugout tightens into silence. If the observer confirms the rounds are falling on friendly troops, the deception snaps. Alan's 10-minute miracle evaporates. The observer barks new corrections. Drei Strich, Nordostervorschlag new einstellen. Alan swears under his breath. The adjustment will move the battery fire back toward Allied positions. Lysander's hand closes around his shoulder. Don't force it, he warns softly. We've done enough. Enough? How do you measure enough? When Germans are accidentally destroying their own counterattack, when every misplaced round saves a rifleman you'll never meet, when 10 minutes of chaos might buy a foothold in Italy. Alan's jaw clenches. The Germans are adjusting fast now, dangerously fast. He intercepts the observer again, listens twice, confirms intent, then slips his own voice into the space between syllables like a scalpel between ribs. Negative, Eigen Linien, Sichtleni Getiuscht durch Rauch, Bestetig Vorherige Coordinaten. Negative, friendly lines, smoke deception, confirm previous coordinates. The lie is bold, almost reckless. He's not suggesting corrections now, he's instructing the observer that his own eyes are wrong. For a moment, no one speaks, neither in German nor English. The valley holds its breath. If the observer pushes back, the game ends. Men die, gunners reset. The counterattack regains its teeth. But instead, the observer hesitates. Smoke is thick today, distances lie. Italy is a battlefield designed to confuse. He relents. Verstanden, fortsetzen. Understood, continue. Alan doesn't realize he's been holding his breath until his lungs scream for air. He pulls the headphones up, lets them rest on his crown for a second, eyes closed, chest rising and falling like a diver between depths. Lysander watches him, half admiration, half disbelief. You're not human, he mutters. But he is. 17 is painfully human. 17 is too young to drink in pubs, but old enough to duel artillery officers through stolen frequencies. Outside, the battle shifts again. The German infantry, already rattled, break formation across the terraces. Officers try dragging them forward, but mortar fire cuts them sideways. A runner tumbles behind a stone wall. Someone throws up a flare, then extinguishes it in panic. Confusion spreads through the valley like dye poured into water. Bloody magnificent, Grave whispers. Alan snaps the headset back onto his ears. His pupils are huge, dilated, predatory, hungry for signal. The radio isn't equipment anymore. It's territory, a front line only he can navigate. But Germany doesn't surrender frequencies lightly. Through the static comes a new voice, not an artillery man. Higher, command net, different cadence, different authority, the kind of voice that makes sergeants panic and lieutenants straighten their backs. Alan doesn't understand every word. Dialect can be a tricky enemy, but he understands tone instantly. They've escalated. The new controller demands authentication, demands observer confirmation, demands damage reports. He's pulling the net back under centralized control. Even worse, Alan hears someone else join the frequency from the terraces, panting, breathless, boots scraping rubble, close to the impacts. A survivor. He gives first-hand corrections, not smoke, not deception. He's seen where the shells fell, seen which trenches they shattered, which helmets they tore open. His report cuts through the net, like wire through cloth. Friendly casualties, friendly trenches, friendly blood. The deception unravels in real time. Alan stops transmitting. The Germans don't need a code word anymore, they have proof. The frequency explodes with orders to cease fire, to pull batteries back, to re-establish lines. The mortar umbrella collapses entirely, not because Alan fooled them, but because they finally understood who they'd been killing. The German counterattack withers under its own recall. But victory in war is rarely clean and never sufficient. From above the terraces comes another new sound, faint, mechanical, gathering speed. Treads. German armor. Alan opens his mouth to warn Lysander. But the tank commander already has binoculars on the valley, already sees the trenches, the mortars softened, already recognizes an opportunity the schoolboy never intended to give him. The artillery duel is over. The next phase is steel. And Alan suddenly realizes he's not the predator anymore. He's just a boy sitting between frequencies while a tank chooses what to crush first. The first clatter of tracks isn't loud. It's distant, muffled, like someone dragging a toolbox across a barn floor. But it grows, fast, heavy, directionless at first, then horrifyingly precise. Panzers don't sneak, they announce. Alan doesn't need binoculars to visualize it. He's heard that rhythm before: training films, mechanical schematics, the lectures field engineers give when they want boys to understand what will kill them fastest. But film rattles don't prepare you for the real thing, grinding down a terrace staircase built for caravans and mules. Lysander slams the dugout door open and shouts into the trench. Armor moving south, get anti-tank up now. The reply is chaos. Men scramble for PIAT rounds. Bren gunners fling themselves across communication trenches. Someone yells for the Indian gunners on the ridge. Someone else swears the PIAT is missing its spring again. The radio net is no longer a battlefield, it's just noise. German commands collide with British chatter, artillery chatter with casualty calls, the entire valley turning into a choir of fear and machinery. Alan tears off his headset and follows Lysander up the dugout steps. The outside world slams into him: dirt, smoke, adrenaline, the metallic stink of burned paint, and olive oil from shattered cooking tins. The tank appears between two terraces like a wolf emerging from the underbrush. Panzer III short-barrel variant, not fast, not elegant, but stubborn. The blue-gray of its armor is smeared with mud and orchard dust. The commander stands half out of the cupola, goggles glinting, scanning the broken farmland for prey. Infantry cling to its flanks, helmeted shadows darting between terraces, rifles up, nerves tight. British rifles crack from the stone walls. The tank ignores them. Small arms bounce off its armor like hail against a church bell. The commander points with a gloved hand. One of the infantry darts forward, sets up an MG-34, and begins sweeping the trench line. Alan ducks as rounds slap the stone lip above him. Chips rain down like sharp snowflakes. Someone drags him backward by the collar, grave, swearing and sweating. Stay low, you little lunatic. Tanks don't care how clever you sound over the wireless. But Alan isn't thinking about tanks. He's thinking about the mortar batteries he borrowed, stolen, really, and the fact that they've just been silenced. The irony is sickening. His victory unshielded the counterattack, yes, but it unshielded the defenders too. The battlefield opened both ways. Steel doesn't care who tricked who 10 minutes ago. The Panzer's turret begins to traverse, slow but inevitable. The muzzle tracks the trench, settling like a curse on the position Lysander holds. A PIAT round arcs out from behind an overturned plow. It hits the tank's right track guard with a squeal and a metallic cough. Too shallow, too high. The warhead fails to bite. The Panzer doesn't flinch. It fires. The gunshot is a physical thing, pressure and heat and violence smashed into one instant. The wall near Lysander explodes in a hail of stone and blood and olive leaves. Men disappear. Others scream without realizing it. Alan feels something primal claw up his throat. Fear, guilt, maybe both. The tank rolls forward again, infantry fanning out, MG turning the terraces into a threshing floor. Lysander catches Alan's sleeve. Back to the dugout, get on the net, tell Brigade the counterattack, gone armored. But Brigade won't respond fast enough. Staff radios move slower than tanks, and slower than fear. Alan looks past the terraces, beyond the tank, toward the ridgeline where the 25-pounders wait like silent gods. Indian gun crews crouch behind shields, waiting for coordinates they can trust. Coordinates! The realization slams into him so hard he sways. He can't talk to the Germans anymore, but he can talk to the Indians. He bolts back into the dugout, grave right behind him. The interior flickers with lamplight and dust, map still trembling from the Panzer's shot. Alan shoves his headset on and keys the British net. Charlie Actual, we have armor in the terraces. Marking target, grid 3721, elevation moderate. Request he immediate battery length. The line crackles. Say again, armor confirmed. Confirmed, Alan snaps. Panzer, short barrel, infantry support, 30 yards from primary trench. The valley answers with thunder. The first 25-pounder round screams over the ridgeline and bursts 2 terraces above the tank, imprecise but terrifying. Dirt and stone rain over the panzer crew. Infantry scatter, curses swallowed by gunfire. Second round lands lower, closer, showering the tank with shattered wall and grapevines. The MG-34 stops firing just long enough for the defenders to breathe again. One more correction, just one. Alan keys the mic, voice razor-sharp. Drop 50, fire for effect. Silence. Then 5 guns crack at once. Brutal, disciplined, relentless. The barrage descends onto the terraces like the fist of a god tired of watching men bicker over orchards. The panzer tries to reverse, track grinding against stone steps slick with dust. It moves 3 yards and vanishes inside a cloud of dirt, shrapnel, and screaming steel. When the air clears, the tank is still there but wrong. Hatch open, turret crooked, one track sagging off its sprocket like a broken watch spring. Infantry scatter into the terraces, leaving their steel backbone to die alone. A cheer rises from the trench line, a short one. No one in Italy cheers for long, cheering draws fire. Grave turns to Alan, breathless. You just killed a panzer with directions. Alan doesn't smile, his voice is ice. I gave them location, God did the killing. Outside, the counterattack is collapsing for real now. No mortar umbrella, no tank, no momentum. German infantry melt back into the terraces they came from, carrying wounded that weren't wounded 15 minutes ago. Victory, maybe. But Lysander is already staring down the valley with binoculars again. He lowers them slowly. There's another formation, he whispers, and those aren't infantry. Alan swallows. The war isn't done with their little orchard. Not even close. The survivors of the panzer's escort vanish into the terraces, leaving streaks of blood on stone and smashed grapes glistening like purple glass. It would be poetic if poetry had any place in this valley. It doesn't. Lysander hands the binoculars to Grave, his jaw tightening. Armored cars, maybe a half platoon of them, moving up behind the terraces. Grave curses, short, exhausted, as if his vocabulary has been worn down to profanity and prayer. They're stubborn bastards, I'll give 'em that. Alan listens as the British net churns. Reports bleed through, fragmentary, anxious. The counterattack has been blunted, not broken. German discipline lives in persistence, not momentum. They'll throw bodies into trenches until nightfall if they have to. They've done worse in Tunisia, worse in the Balkans. Italy won't be any different. He slips back into the dugout, headset waiting like a familiar vice. His fingers slide over the dials, searching for broadcast clarity. The Indian 25-pounders are repositioning. They need fresh coordinates, fresh logic. He breathes, steel in, static out. Charlie Actual, new contact. Armored cars bearing 16, distance 150. The line crackles, confirm cars. Alan glances at Lysander. The lieutenant nods once, eyes not leaving the ridgeline. Confirmed. Then range. Alan hesitates. Estimating range in Italy is like measuring time underwater, distorted by terrain, smoke, and fear. But hesitation kills more men than mistakes. 150, he repeats. The guns answer. This time the shells land short, exploding against a stone wall and vaporizing a century of terraced grapes in a heartbeat. The second salvo climbs the staircase of the valley, gaining accuracy with each impact. Through the haze, one of the armored cars jerks sideways and stops, either stalled or dead. The others cluster around it, swarming like beetles, trying to regain cohesion. Drop 20, Alan calls. Continue battery. The valley roars again. The terraces bloom with smoke and dust, vines curling and twisting in the shockwave's wake. But as the smoke clears, Alan feels the first cold pulse of dread. The armored cars aren't braking. They're climbing. Italy has never been kind to tanks. The terraces are a labyrinth, too narrow, too uneven, too ancient for steel to navigate cleanly, but armored cars are different. Light, fast, aggressive, built for reconnaissance and pursuit. They turn obstacles into tactics, and these Germans know their terrain. The lead car crests the upper ridge, hull angled down toward the British trenches. Its autocannon swivels and rips a burst through the field kitchen, shredding tarpaulin and scattering tins of ration biscuits. The second follows, firing tracer down the communication trench like a seamstress stitching death into the earth. Alan feels a strange, useless thought drift into his head. The Germans learn faster than radios warn. Lysander's voice snaps reality back into shape. PIAT teams up, Bren, on that ridge. But the trenches are thinning. The men are exhausted. The tank duel stole breath and blood from the line, and the counterattack, stubborn and wounded, refuses to die quietly. One of the Indian gunners sprints toward the PIAT, round in hand, only to dive as a burst of autocannon fire snaps the air above him. The round rolls down the trench floor and comes to rest by Alan's boot. He freezes. War introduces strange arithmetic. A PIAT round plus a 17-year-old plus a trench is normally equal to nothing. But the armored cars are close enough to smell the oil on their hulls. Grave scoops up the round, shoves it toward the PIAT team, and swears at Alan for looking like he might volunteer for sainthood. The British net screams for artillery again, this time frantic, fragmented. Charlie actual, urgent, armored, cresting, danger close, danger close. Static cuts the line. Alan grips the headset tighter, knuckles pale. Come on, come on. Lysander drops into the dugout, sweat streaked with dust. Signals too dirty, they won't fire without confirmation, too close to our lines. Alan's mind races, mortars are dead, tanks are dead, armored cars are climbing, brigade is listening but afraid, the Indians are ready but cautious. The Germans have momentum again, half-crippled, fumbling but alive. He scans the map, tracing distances, angles, terraces, lines of sight. His brain clicks through geometry the way other boys click through football scores. Then he hears it. Another broadcast on the German net, short, clipped, pointing its vehicles toward a gap in the British trenches. The enemy is calling their shot before taking it. Alan's eyes widen. He plugs back into the British set and does the one thing doctrine never considered. He begins relaying German armored movements directly to the artillery as if he were an observer on their side. Charlie actual, enemy armor turning north, 2 vehicles, elevation increasing, preparing to crest. The line hesitates. Then, copy on your marks. Alan almost laughs. Brigade doesn't know who he is, doesn't care. He speaks like an observer, so they answer like artillery. He marks the cresting point, marks the turn, marks the kill box. Fire! The 25-pounders oblige. Shells crash into the ridge like boulders hurled by giants. The lead armored car pitches forward, nose buried in shattered soil. The second tries to reverse, but the third jams its rear bumper, panicking the entire column. Then the fourth car crests, too late to know better. The shell that hits it is obscene. It flips once, twice, lands upside down in the terraces, wheels clawing at air like a beetle dying in slow motion. Grave whoops, Lysander exhales. Someone in the trenches laughs the wild laugh of a man who doesn't yet believe he's alive. But the celebration dies too quickly. Alan lifts the headphones back up. The German net is quiet now. Not defeated quiet. Thinking quiet. Learning quiet. And quiet is the most dangerous phase of any enemy. Quiet on a battlefield is not peace, it is calculus. The kind men perform with blood still drying on their sleeves. Alan adjusts the gain. Static washes the dugout in pale noise, a cold river running through wire and copper. The Germans aren't shouting anymore, they're thinking, reassembling, updating. Radio nets are brains, and stiff brains don't panic twice. Then a voice, low, clipped Berlin dialect, cuts through the static. Abweichung Kommandante, Zweitfrequenzprüfen. Deviation, command, check second frequency. Alan's stomach drops. Of course they have a second frequency. Only fools run artillery on a single line, and German doctrine produces many things. Fools are not among them. The first net was a stage. The second will be a courtroom. He scrambles through the tuning range, fingers trembling with urgency, twisting the dial until it bleeds into a new channel. The second frequency is surgical. No chatter, no corrections, just orders and confirmations. The cadence is terrifying in its control. Aufklärer bereits Ziel erkannt, Koordinaten folgen. Recon ready, target acquired, coordinates incoming. Alan freezes. Target who, where? Then, like a whispered confession, the answer arrives. British Kommandogruppe, Nordhang, Drei Geschütze, Priorität hoch. British Command Group, North Slope, 3 guns, priority high. The Germans aren't done counterattacking, they're reorganizing to amputate British command. Decapitation before retreat, tidy, efficient, textbook. Alan spins, nearly colliding with Lysander as he bursts into the dugout. They're shifting targets, Alan gasps, not at the trenches, higher, they're going after command. Lysander doesn't waste breath asking how he knows. He's seen men with instincts. Radio is just another battlefield. Can you jam their orders? Yes. No. Jamming is brute force. It draws attention. It invites retaliation. And jamming without power is like shouting down a cathedral organ with a tin whistle. Alan shakes his head, not for long, and not without them noticing. Lysander pulls the map off the wall and slaps it onto the table. The guns on the ridge are circles in pencil, little islands of British authority. If they go, brigade loses its hands. The trenches lose their teeth. The Germans regain initiative. This war is a pendulum, and it swings fast. Alan listens to the second net again, writes the German coordinates on the map with a trembling pencil. Lysander's eyes follow the numbers, narrowing. They're off, he mutters. Wrong ridge, that's a misread. Alan blinks. They're bombing their own observing position. No, Lysander says, they're guessing. They're observers dead or blind. Then the lieutenant's gaze snaps up, sharp, hungry, dangerous. Give them a correction. Alan stares. What? Not to help them, to ruin them. Feed them a correction that widens the error, make them miss by more. Alan's pulse kicks. It's elegant, it's mad, it's war. He settles the headphones over his ears, waits for the next coordinate call, then slips his voice into the surgical net. Quieter this time, formal, with the kind of discipline that earns obedience. Negative, Strich Zurück, Einschlag südlich, Korrigieren zwei Strich nordwärts. Negative, impact south, correct 2 increments north. It's plausible, conservative, deadly, because the real guns are nowhere near north. The Germans confirm the correction without protest and relay the new coordinates to their mortars. Alan rips the headset off and braces for the impacts. The barrage arrives like a hammer without mercy, shattering clay, pulverizing terraces, uprooting vines that have grown since before the Kaiser was born. Lysander waits for the echoes to fade, then raises binoculars. The look that slides across his face is cold satisfaction. Beautiful, they missed everything, hit nothing but hillside. But Alan isn't smiling. He hears movement on the German net again, no panic this time, just recalibration, doctrine, adaptation. The Berlin voice returns, clipped with razor precision. Frequenz kompromittiert, Wechseln, code rot. Frequency compromised, shift, code red. Alan's breath leaves his chest in a sharp, terrified laugh. They know. He doesn't mean they suspect interference. He means they know someone is inside the wire. Before Lysander can speak, a shell detonates behind the dugout, showering the entrance with dirt. The lights flicker, dust pours down like a funeral veil. Grav dives inside, panting. Command wants status. They think we've broken the counterattack. They want estimates. Alan doesn't answer. His eyes are locked on the headphones, still humming with German recalibration. The Germans have changed frequencies twice now. The next shift won't be technical. It will be tactical. Very tactical. Because artillery isn't the only weapon that hunts by radio. And somewhere beyond the terraces, a German signals truck is rewriting the battlefield with a new objective. Find the boy with the English voice and kill him before sundown. The counterattack isn't dying, it's evolving. The barrage didn't stop all at once. Mortars don't listen like men do. They wind down, late shells whining overhead, delayed fuses coughing up dirt, a final tremor of steel against hillside rock. Alan pulled the headset off and felt the sudden absence of voices. No German officers barking coordinates, no spotters calling in angles, just wind, and the distant groaning of artillery that had finally realized it was killing its own. Lieutenant Cooper crouched beside him, face streaked with grime, one cheek bright with a slash of dust where a fragment had skated by. "Report," he whispered. Alan swallowed, eyes still fixed on the silent handset. They stopped. Across the valley, a single figure in field grey stumbled out of the churned mist, hands raised, helmet gone. Then another and another. Signalmen and gunners, the men who had spent an hour trying to murder strangers, now blinking through the smoke as if waking from a bad dream. British infantry began moving, cautious at first, muzzles up, bayonets fixed. The trench line that had been impossible a half-hour ago now looked dazed and perforated, like a stage set after a sudden storm. And Alan Fairbanks, 17, ears still buzzing, watched captured Wehrmacht signalers march past with their hands above their heads, uniforms speckled with chalky detritus thrown by their own mortars. One of them, a lanky corporal with hollow cheeks and cracked lips, glanced sideways at the boy in the radio net. Not with hatred, not with shock, but with the bewildered recognition of two people who both lived inside the wires. What had just happened was impossible on paper. No one teaches teenagers how to hijack enemy fire missions. There is no doctrine for it, no drill. Just instinct, timing, and a bit of nerve no manual can manufacture. But if the fight had been won, the war outside this valley had not. And the men who command wars had questions, dangerous ones. Who authorized this? How? And most importantly, could it be done again? The debrief didn't happen in a grand hall or even a proper headquarters. It took place in a half-shattered farmhouse whose roof had been ripped off earlier that morning. Rain dripped through broken rafters, tapping against empty milk bottles and ration tins as officers leaned over maps pinned to a wooden door. Captain Henshaw lit a cigarette with hands that barely trembled. "Fairbanks," he said without looking up, "walk us through it again." Alan sat on an overturned ammo crate, fingers tracing invisible dials on his knees. He explained the interception, how the German mortar net was unencrypted, how their spotter's cadence gave away range increments, how the battery officer double-confirmed every correction with a clipped jowl that made spoofing him almost too easy. One major stopped scribbling. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "they never suspected it was us?" Alan shrugged, not until they started landing on their own trenches. Short laughter, nervous, not joyful. Because everyone in that room understood what that meant. If a teenage radio tech could do it, somewhere in Germany, a teenage radio tech could do it back. The formal questions ended. The unofficial ones began. How old are you? Where'd you learn signals? Still in school before the call-up. Alan answered mechanically, as if each sentence belonged to someone else. 17. Royal Signals Cadet Scheme. Grammar school in Kent. Math, physics, Latin. Father wanted him to be an engineer, not a soldier. When the officers finally dismissed him, the farmhouse emptied into a soft Italian dusk. Cooper walked beside him, helmet tucked under one arm. You realize, the lieutenant muttered, what you did today will go in someone's war diary. Alan didn't answer. He was listening to the valley, distant engines, spade work, stretcher calls, the metallic clank of rifles being cleared and safetied. War was made of noises, and he suddenly understood how many of them were lies disguised as signals. Through the smoke, he spotted the captured German signaller again, the lanky corporal. The man paused as a guard nudged him forward. Their eyes met for a heartbeat. The corporal lifted one hand, palm flat, miming a radio headset over his ear. A small salute from one operator to another. Then he disappeared into the column of prisoners. Alan breathed in the gunpowder and damp wheat. For a moment, he didn't feel victorious. Just older. History books would later call the skirmish a minor tactical disturbance along the axis of advance. But the men who crawled through that valley knew better. A war can pivot on a hill no one remembers, triggered by a decision no one authorized, made by a boy no one expected to matter. And somewhere beyond the ridgeline, the campaign rolled on, new frequencies, new batteries, new puzzles inside the static. War keeps moving, even when you're still 17.